Welcome, listener, in the shadows. We bring stories into the light. Join me as we explore the encounters no one speaks of and the things that watch from the dark. Before we dive into tonight's terrifying tale, a quick question. Do you dare wear the fear? Our exclusive Shadows merch is here. Hoodies, tees, and more, designed for those who embrace the darkness. Get yours before they vanish forever. Link below. Something came to my house last night. I don't even know where to begin. Part of me wishes I could wake up and just pretend it was all a nightmare, but the feeling lingers, haunting me. Something came to my house last night. I don't think it's gone. It's still here in the shadows, in the corners of the room where I can't quite see it. Watching. Waiting. I keep telling myself it's over, that it was just a trick of the mind, but I know better. The presence is still there, and I'm terrified that it's just waiting for the right moment to return. The house in the woods, my family's house, is old. Not just old in the way that houses age with time, but ancient, built by my grandfather and then passed down through the generations. The structure is solid, made of thick, weathered wood and stone, creaking and groaning in the night as if it were alive. It sits on the edge of a dense forest, miles away from the nearest town. The woods, thick with towering pines and tangled underbrush, have slowly reclaimed the land around the house. The trees grow so close to the house that, at night, it feels as though they're pressing against the walls, clawing at the windows with their gnarly branches, as if trying to reach inside. Growing up, I always felt like the woods were a part of me. They were my sanctuary, a place where I could escape the world, pretend I was some great explorer, charting the unknown. The forest has its own rhythm, its own language, if you know how to listen. I spent countless hours wandering through the woods, learning every trail, every nook and cranny. The wind whispers through the trees, the rustling leaves speaking in a language only the forest understands. It was peaceful, safe. But as I got older, I started to notice things. Small things at first, odd sounds, strange feelings. The way the woods seemed to breathe around me, the way the shadows seemed to shift just a little too quickly when the sun began to set. At night, the woods become impenetrable. The darkness is so complete that it feels like the very air is alive with something. There's no light, no streetlights, no neighbors, just the vast expanse of blackness pressing in from all sides. The stars are barely visible through the canopy of trees, and the silence is so thick it's suffocating. Every creak of the house, every groan of the floorboards echoes in that silence like a warning. I used to love it. The isolation, the quiet, the feeling that the world was far away, beyond reach. But over time, that isolation began to feel oppressive. And when I reached my teens, that quiet began to feel like something else, empty. I started to hear things that weren't supposed to be there. Noises, whispers, like a voice on the wind. Footsteps in the woods when I knew no one was around. Sometimes I'd hear someone calling my name from deep in the forest, but when I followed the sound, I'd find nothing. No one. At first, I told myself it was just my imagination, that I was growing paranoid. My parents thought it was all in my head. It's just the woods, my dad would say, his deep voice calm and steady. The wind plays tricks on you, nature's like that. But I wasn't so sure. There was something in the air, something that made me feel watched. Then there was Murphy. Murphy is my dog. A big, loyal mutt with the energy of 100 dogs and the protective instincts of a guard dog. He used to love going on walks with me through the woods. He'd run ahead, sniffing every tree, chasing after squirrels, barking at the occasional rabbit. But for the past few months, things have changed. Murphy refuses to go near the woods anymore. He stands at the edge of the yard, staring into the darkness, growling low in his throat. His fur stands up on end, his body rigid, his eyes wide with a fear I've never seen in him before. When I try to coax him to come inside, he hesitates, eyes flicking nervously toward the trees. It's like he knows something I don't, something he's too afraid to face. It's not just Murphy, though. The animals, wildlife, the deer we used to see grazing near the tree line have all vanished. I can't remember the last time I saw a single animal near the house. It's like they've all fled, disappeared without a trace. It wasn't until I found a tuft of fur in the yard, matted with blood, that I realized something was terribly wrong. My dad said it was probably a coyote, but I've lived here long enough to know that coyotes don't come this close to the house. I've never even seen one around here. Something else is out there, something that's driving the animals away, and I don't know what it is. The worst part is the air. The air around the house feels wrong. It's thick, heavy, as if the woods themselves are holding their breath. The stillness is suffocating, like the entire forest is waiting for something. And then there's the dream, the nightmare that I can't shake. In the dream, I'm standing in the woods, completely alone. The trees are twisted, their bark warped like gnarled hands reaching out for me. The air is cold, and I can hear something moving in the shadows, breathing, waiting. I try to run, but my feet are frozen to the ground. And then I see them, two glowing eyes staring at me from the darkness. They don't blink, don't move, just watch me. And then the dream ends with me waking up in a cold sweat, Murphy whimpering at the foot of my bed, staring toward the window like he sees something I don't. The night it happened, last night, everything changed. It started innocently enough. My dad asked me to take the trash out before bed. It was one of those tasks that's always been part of the routine. Grab the bags, walk down the long driveway, dump them in the bins. Our driveway stretches through the woods, dark and empty, leading out into the wilderness beyond. There's no streetlight to guide me, just the pale moonlight filtering through the trees. Normally, I wouldn't think twice about it, but tonight felt different. The air was still, too still. I stepped outside, Murphy trailing behind me as I walked toward the trash bins. I don't know why, but I felt like something was off. It was that same feeling I get when something's about to happen, when the world holds its breath. The wind had died completely, and the usual sounds of the forest, crickets, owls, had gone silent. It was as though the entire woods had gone still, waiting for something. I paused for a moment, looking around. There was no movement in the trees, no sign of life, just darkness. I glanced at Murphy, who was standing at the edge of the yard, staring into the woods. His fur bristled, his body tense, his eyes wide with fear. His ears were flat against his head, and I could hear a low growl building in his chest. I turned to follow his gaze, and that's when I saw it. A shape, tall, too tall. It stood just beyond the tree line, a shadow in the darkness. At first I thought it was a trick of the light, but then I saw it more clearly. It wasn't just a tree or a figure in the distance. It was wrong. Its limbs were stretched, impassably long, its body unnaturally rigid. It stood like a person, but it wasn't human. Its posture was stiff, its movements jerky, as if it wasn't used to having a body at all. And its eyes, two glowing orbs, bright and unblinking, staring straight at me. A wave of cold terror washed over me. Every muscle in my body froze. My heart raced, pounding in my chest like a drum. It felt like the very air around me had turned to ice. I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe. Murphy started barking, his voice frantic, filled with terror. He lunged forward, but the thing didn't move. It just stood there, staring, unblinking. My mind screamed at me to run, to get inside, but I couldn't. I was rooted to the spot. And then it took a step. Not like a person, not like anything I've ever seen. Its limbs didn't bend like mine. It glided forward, the movement unnatural, jerky, like it was being dragged through the air. I took a step back slowly, trying not to make a sound. The thing didn't move after me, but I could feel its presence, looming, watching. I don't remember when I bolted, but I found myself running toward the door, panic rising in my throat. I slammed the door behind me, gasping for breath, my hands shaking. "Dad," I shouted, barely able to speak. "Something's out there. Something's watching the house." My dad was sitting on the couch, watching TV. He looked up, confused. "What's going on?" "There's something in the woods," I said, my voice trembling. "Something wrong." He stood up, his face turning serious. "Probably just a deer or something," he muttered, walking to the window. His tone was dismissive, but then he stopped, his face going pale. "What the hell?" he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. He grabbed the shotgun from the closet and muttered, "Stay inside." I watched from the window as he stepped onto the porch, the beam of his flashlight cutting through the darkness. Murphy was still barking, frantic, but the yard was empty. There was nothing. Whatever had been out there was gone. My dad turned back, shining the light into the trees, but he seemed unsure. He called out into the silence, his voice barely audible. But then, thud. A loud, heavy thud, like something had slammed into the side of the house. The walls rattled, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. My dad spun around, raising his shotgun, and I grabbed my phone, dialing 911 with shaking hands. But then another sound, this time from the backyard. A slow, deliberate scratching, dragging against the door. I turned to look. There it was again, closer. The glowing eyes. It was standing just beyond the porch now, watching me. It had no expression, no mouth, just eyes. And then it spoke. But it didn't speak like a person. The voice came out distorted, broken, like it was coming through a broken radio. "Help me." The words echoed in my head, hollow and wrong. I screamed for my dad, but when he came running, the thing was gone. The aftermath, we didn't sleep that night. The fear clung to us like a thick fog. I kept every light on in my room, Murphy pressed close to my side. My dad stayed awake, pacing near the windows, shotgun in hand. My mom sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea she never touched, staring blankly into space. By morning, I thought maybe I had imagined it, but then I found the tracks. In the dirt, not human, not animal, something in between. And they didn't stop at the door. They came inside. The house is wrong now. The air is thick with unease. Every creak, every rustle makes my heart race. And the thing, it's still out there. We're waiting. And I'm scared it's coming back. You made it back for now. But the things in the dark never truly leave, do they? They watch. They wait. And perhaps they remember you now, too. If you want to hear more, if you dare to listen again, step back into the shadows. Like the video. Subscribe. But know this. Some doors, once opened, do not close so easily.